Good afternoon. Gaza is starving. The UN has confirmed it. Famine is now official. Yet, Israel dismisses it as a lie, while the US stays silent. But Europe is cracking. Dutch Foreign Minister Casper Volkamp resigned in protest, collapsing his government over failed sanctions. Egypt warns of a humanitarian collapse. From The Hague to Cairo, voices rise. This is not just war, it's a man-made disaster. Hunger is the weapon, children are the victims, and silence is complicity. Is this the end or the moment the world finally acts? Welcome to Think Tank.
Our world is becoming unhinged.
The Guardian has reported that in a stark and significant development, the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, the IPC, has officially declared a widespread famine in Gaza. This declaration, a global gold standard for such crises, confirms that a quarter of the population, over 500,000 people, are now starving. The situation is expected to worsen significantly in the coming weeks. This man-made disaster is a direct result of Israel's actions and policies that have systematically hampered the delivery of humanitarian aid. Despite international warnings, Israel has restricted access, blocked foreign media, and minimized the severity of the crisis, leading to this preventable catastrophe. The famine is a clear moral indictment and a failure of humanity. It also constitutes a war crime. The international community must now act decisively with an immediate ceasefire to ensure unhindered aid access, which is the only way to save lives. This crisis cannot be ignored any longer. According to Palestine Chronicle, the political scene in the Netherlands is facing a deep crisis as the new Social Contract Party has withdrawn from the caretaker government. This came after the foreign minister resigned because of a disagreement over imposing sanctions on Israel. This crisis is a clear sign of the growing pressure on European governments to take a firm stance against Israeli policies in Gaza. The Dutch minister's resignation reflects a major split within the government, influenced by widespread public protests demanding action. This event shows a critical shift in European politics. The debate has moved from a simple statement to concrete action against the genocide in Gaza. The resignation highlights a new reality where political accountability is now directly linked to a government's position on this crisis. After 22 months of silence, a famine declared. A minister resigns in protest, and the world faces an unbearable question. When morality clashes with power, which side will history judge?
For 22 months, the world watched. Now the United Nations has spoken. Famine is official in Gaza, a man-made catastrophe, a failure of humanity, and a reckoning of the international order. UN humanitarian chief Tom Fletcher accused Israel of systematic obstruction, while the IPC confirmed over 500,000 face starvation. Israel calls it a lie, but the images tell another story. "90% of aid blocked. Wheat, medicine, flour left to rot in the desert. Is this obstruction or collective punishment?" Then came a political earthquake. Dutch Foreign Minister Casper Volkamp resigns. "I cannot be part of a government that refuses to sanction a nation starving a people." His entire party collapses. A caretaker government fractures, not over immigration, not over economy, but over moral refusal to act. Europe stands divided, while Britain threatens symbolic recognition of Palestine and Germany reviews trade ties. Are these gestures or empty diplomacy? Egypt, the Arab voice, calls it what it is, a double standard. While Ukraine drew swift arms and outrage, Gaza draws silence until now. Same crisis, opposite response. Why? Famine is not just humanitarian, it's legal. The ICJ's genocide case advances. Will this declaration be the smoking gun? The world saw famine come. The question is no longer, did we know? It is, what did we do? Because history does not forgive spectators, and hunger does not wait.
By providing more analysis about the most recent updates concerning the famine in Gaza and how is Europe remaining silent regarding Israel's actions, we're joined from London by Dr. Mohsen Salamouni, political economist and professor at London University, and from Barcelona, Mr. Meher Nicholas Ferzelli, director of EU Asian Center. We welcome both of you gentlemen to Think Tank, and let me here start with Dr. Salmouni. Dr. Salmouni, with the UN declaring famine in Gaza and Israel calling it a lie, can the world still afford diplomatic silence?
We have to talk. Awalan, good evening, and I wish the best for all the Arab nations. But today we are standing against the biggest conspiracy in earth here. What this conspiracy is about, right? There is two power here, United States and Europe, and it used to be Russia, but Russia not anymore power because they are withdrawn from this area because they are involved in their own Ukraine war. The other power, which I think it could be a very, very effective and strong, is the Middle East. If the Gulf area, in my opinion, have joined and supported Egypt, would it be the biggest economic power in the world here? We have God gave us weather, God gave us water, and God gave us also the life of the European and the life of the American and the life of the world, which energy which we have. And the Middle East produce 34% of the energy to the world. Now, we come here to talk about what is happening right now. We America allowing Israel to be a big influence in the Middle East because America and Europe enjoying very much that the Middle East cannot be in peace in order to secure their interest and in order to secure their demand for the energy and power. Therefore, they have kept the Middle East and especially the Gulf area divided. And above all, the most important, to add insult to injury, that the Gulf area has rewarded Mr. Trump with 5.1 trillion instead of taking a stand. Okay, you can give him whatever you like, but take a stand and say the crisis of Gaza has to be sorted. The Middle East today and the leader of the Middle East, they are sleeping because they think they can protect themselves. But I believe very much this is not going to be. This is because Mr. Netanyahu, 3 or 4 weeks before the 7th of October, Mr. Netanyahu announced to the United Nations about the new Israel and the new land of Israel and the expansion of Israel. Today, Mr. Netanyahu and Israel has created Hamas, has funded Hamas, has given
Dr.
Hamas
Salmouni,
all the weapons.
Dr. Salmouni, if I may ask you here,
Yeah.
now we're speaking about a fact on the ground that was happening. Um, I'm still asking, can the world afford this diplomatic silence? I'll get back to you. I'll get back to you here. Let me go here to Mr. Fazeli. And can the EU claim moral leadership when its members fund and arm a state accused of genocide?
Well, here it's a very delicate question you're asking, because basically from the outside, so from the Middle East, Israel, Palestine, Asia, Africa, the EU is really perceived like a cohesive bloc, and it's partly the fault of the Europeans. When you listen to Emmanuel Macron or Ursula von der Leyen themselves, they pretend to be a cohesive bloc. They pretend to be the equivalent of the United States of America, right? A federal European government. In reality, it's a fiction to a large extent. So Europe is not yet, far from it, a federal state like you have in the United States or Canada. The nation states, the components of the EU, they still have much more sovereignty than the EU government or the EU Commission itself. And so to make a long story short, when the EU foreign minister, in that case, Kaja Kallas, right? Kaja Kallas, the Estonian politician turned European Union foreign minister, she's the face of European Union foreign policy, but she doesn't get to decide a lot. In the case of the Palestinian, it's good because Kaja Kallas, just like Ursula von der Leyen, is very pro-Israeli. And not only are Ursula von der Leyen and Kaja Kallas pro-Israeli, they are close to the right wing, the most nationalist, irredentist, ultra xenophobic wing of the Likud party. Kaja Kallas herself is a personal friend of Prime Minister Netanyahu. But like I said, she doesn't get to decide that much. So we cannot lay that much of a blame on poor Kaja Kallas's shoulders, because these policies, the arms sales to Israel, the embargo, the relations with the Israeli government, the potential recognition of a Palestinian state in September at the UN, all that is actually decided mostly at nation-state level. So it's decided by the French and the German and the Italian, etc. governments, right? So what I'm coming at is, yes, on average, the EU is slightly pro-Israeli, and in the case of the EU Commission, very pro-Israeli, but it's a facade, and beyond the facade, things are really decided in Paris, Berlin, and Rome, and you have different shades. So every European country, to be honest with you, has a different opinion, and so there's
So
no...
you mean here that the EU is divided from within, right?
Yes.
And that
Yes,
each
indeed.
country has its own status, right?
Yes, indeed, especially in thorny, polemical, complicated issue where there is no consensus, like Israel-Palestine, even more so.
Right. Dr. Salmouni, the Dutch foreign minister resigned over sanctions. Does this mark a kind of European moral awakening or just political fracture? What do you think?
There is, because if you look at Europe, Europe is a divided government today, because in Europe we have Spain, and we have Norway, and we have some other country who supported the cause, and the island supported the cause of the Palestinian and supported the cause of Gaza. But here, as they have some serious problem here. The problem started with UK government and the French government and the German government. Although UK, the Prime Minister came out and threatening Israel that he's going to stand and he's going to recognize the Palestinian as a state. But in the same time, he's still supporting Israel by providing Israel with weapons and a new part for women to killing women and kill children. This is the fact. And the same, in the French government is still supporting Israel with weapons and material for weapons there to Israel there. And the German is still standing there. Therefore, European has a very double standard here. But having we look at that, the movement here is coming out from people themselves. We have seen some big support coming out in universities in Europe, and also is coming in some of the states where is the Muslim people have a majority, and especially the state which it have a big swing there. And they are making a big effect, all right, and also making that the policy, making that the Israeli today, and show that the Israeli they are doing a genocide there, and that's it, and it's needed to be stopped. And this movement of the youth and the movement of those young people and the movement of the people in university is growing up every day, every day. But in my opinion, the Gaza problem cannot be solved out alone, depending on Europe and depending on United States. We have to stand, the Gulf area to stand beside the Egyptian government and support them, and we have to be strong and force the issue here. It is something essential. We cannot depend only on Europe to do our work,
yes,
and to save the people.
Totally understood. Totally understood. A united Arab front is a much needed front at this very particular time. Mr. Fazeli, the Hague Group calls for arms embargo. Could this become a new axis of global justice, like the anti-apartheid movement?
I'm a little skeptical. Personally. It's only my personal opinion. Because the anti-apartheid movement, one of the reasons why it succeeded so much was timing. And so the timing was the end of the Cold War, and that anti-apartheid movement, which existed, for a long time, didn't have a lot of bite, right? It was only able to change things on the ground in the late 80s, early 90s, when Soviet Russia, when the Russian communist government collapsed. This is when really the anti-apartheid movement had a bite and was able to change things. And in America itself, the African American community in America played a big part in the anti-apartheid movement. Today, sadly for the Arab world and the Islamic world, we don't see yet, Arab Belgians or Muslim Italians. We don't see them organized the way African Americans were in the late 80s, leading the charge of the anti-apartheid movement. That's one point. Another point is today there's a big difference from the apartheid era. Is we have two superpowers today. Russia is no longer a superpower. And Europe, of course, the European Union, as I said earlier, is very, very far from ever being a superpower. There's only two big global powers today, China and America. And when President Trump entered the White House 8 months ago now, the whole world entered a new era called the age of geoeconomics, or the new great game, pitting Washington against Beijing. That's the great game, right? And so what I'm coming at here, where is the field, the playing field, these two giants, the dragon and the eagle? Where is the field where they fight, where they compete? It is the Asia-Pacific area. So America is pivoting all its military, economic, financial focus and resources on the Asia-Pacific area, away from Europe and the Middle East. That also is very different from the anti-apartheid movement, and that's why Trump wants to close that chapter of the Ukraine-Russia war, which he thinks is a distraction, because he wants to focus on China and Asia. What I'm coming at, that part of the world we call the Near East or the Middle East or Israel or Palestine, is of little strategic value today in the eyes of America and China. It is not the main field where they compete. It's not the part of the world where they are now mobilizing resources. So that is why Trump is happy, quote unquote, to give free rein to Israel, because he sees no strategic value. He sees no strategic importance to that part of the world. And one more point I want to make, comparing, the situation today to the apartheid era, or to the King Faisal and Saddam Hussein era in the 70s, right? In the 70s, with King Faisal in Saudi Arabia, with Ahmed Hassan al-Bakr and Saddam Hussein in Iraq, the Arabs, they came together after the 1973 war, and they decided for a few weeks to come up with an oil embargo, and that worked to a certain extent to put pressure on the West. Today, even if they wanted to, even if the Arabs wanted to, which is very unlikely, to come up with an oil embargo, blah, 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 like they did in 1973, 74, today it would not work. Why? Because the proportion of world energy and oil and gas coming from the Middle East has shrunk dramatically in the past 50 years, and America no longer needs to import oil from the Middle East. So all that put together makes me a little skeptical. The Hague Committee or the Hague Association is a good starting point, but what I'm coming at, it will be a long road, a long and slow. People, children, women and children are dying today.
Mm-hmm. Let me go here to Dr. Salmouni. And Dr. Salmouni, Europe condemns Russia over Ukraine, yet hesitates on Israel. Why this glaring double standard in defending human rights? And what do you have here on what Mr. Fazeli said?
Russia has, Ukraine is more important to Russia than any other area. And Russia has made a deal with especially Putin. Putin and Trump have all a very strong relationship, though it doesn't show, but they do have a strong relationship. And Russia has helped Mr. Trump to be elected previously there, okay, with the lots of information. Today, Russia has made a deal with America and especially Mr. Trump that they will pull out of Syria and bring all the Daesh and all the ISIS people into Syria and move out of Syria there. Therefore, this is part of really the world of conspiracy, of the Jewish conspiracy, which is today integrated on the Middle East. And Russia also pulled out of Iran and allowed America and Israel to bombard Iran. And also the media created the stories that Iran has almost very close to produce a nuclear weapons, but this is not true. Iran has never reached even 1% or 2% to produce a nuclear weapons. Iran is a very weak country, and the military have no military whatsoever or any that's what the talk. That's why America and Israel created the story, therefore, in order to go and hit Iran and tell the Arabs, and especially Saudi Arabia and the Gulf area, here we are. If you ever decided to do anything, we'll do the same. This is exactly the whole picture right now. We need to look at the wider picture. We need to look how we will protect our interests. Our interest, it should be economically. Our interest should be not just military, economically. The power today in the economic power. Israel is being used as a very strong ally to United States. In the Congress, there are 32 Jewish members there, which represent about 18% of the total Congress. Also in America, there is a fund which has carried $244 billion. That fund called CAP fund, and that's produced by the Jewish, and that fund used specifically to elect members of parliament who are sympathize with Israeli cause. Israel today believe that there is the issue of Palestine do not exist and they should not be there in that area. And that is exactly why they are going, and America supporting them, and the European unfortunately support that. Why the Europeans supporting this? Because the European are also have a problem with America, all creating a problem. America has threatened that will pull out of NATO and supplying the defense of NATO, and that's why Europe are agree, especially those big three countries, which is UK, Germany, France. They are following American policy. They pretended that they are helping the cause and to try to solve the problem of the Gaza, but unfortunately, it does not happen. And I personally believe that the problem, it will remain as it is unless we stand together as an Arab and try to force the issue.
Clear. Mr. Fazeli here, you spoke about that it was not the right timing for the anti-apartheid or taking positions like the one that were taken in the 70s during the anti-apartheid and all this issue. And you spoke about the change of the geopolitical alliances and the dynamics of cooperation, and you spoke also about realities on the ground that we have to be aware of when we speak about the situation of Gaza today. Now, if I may ask you here, the images of the starving children, the shocking scenes that we have seen in the social media or in the media at large, do you think that that did not reflect on nations worldwide? And do you think that the social media now would be a true court of the global conscience instead of governments?
It's a very good question, very difficult question. So I'll try to reply as much as I can. Just a caveat or remark, to my esteemed colleague who spoke earlier. I think just like, there's a misconception in Asia and the Middle East, people tend to overestimate the power of the European Union and the European Commission, where in reality, it is rather weak, much weaker than the United States or China. There's another misconception in the Middle East, which is linked to your question, is, in the Middle East, people tend to overestimate the influence of the so-called, Jewish pressure groups in Washington, D.C. As my esteemed, colleague said earlier, why do they overestimate? Because, once again, Netanyahu himself, Prime Minister Netanyahu himself speaks a lot, not only in the name of his government, the Israeli government, which is a modern secular state, but he also very often, Netanyahu and other Israeli right-wing politicians, tend to speak about world Jewry, right? The Jews of the world, etc. That's, of course, an exaggeration. And talking about America, most of the American members of the House of Representatives, most of the American senators...
Briefly, Mr. Ferzeli, because we're running out of time.
Of course, most of them who happen to be of Jewish origin in Washington are actually hostile to the Likud government. So it's a cruel irony, because most Jewish congressmen in America, they don't like Netanyahu. It doesn't mean they support Palestinians, but they are rather critical of Netanyahu. And most of them do not support the current policy of Netanyahu in Gaza and the West Bank.
Right.
If I can just say a few words, I'm not very optimistic. Why? Because I think Netanyahu won the propaganda war, because even his
They
enemies...
own the narratives. They own the narratives.
Even his enemies now, what are they doing? Even his enemies are focusing on the Gaza Strip. And they're saying, we need to save the Gaza Strip. And the people are forgetting the West Bank. The real prize is the West Bank.
I understand. That was Dr. Mohsen Salmouni, political economist, professor at London University, and Mr. Meher Nicholas Ferzeli, director of the EU Asian Center. We thank you both Gentlemen, for your special insights and this valuable discussion. And guest: famine spreads, silence persists, but courage steers. From Cairo to The Hague, the world watches. History is listening. Will we act before it's too late? That brings us to the end of today's episode of Think Tank, which always unveils the complexities of our changing world. Many thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more coming up on Qnews.